Welcome to Reformed Thinking. So here's one of the biggest questions ever. If God is good, why is there so much evil and suffering in the world? It's a tough one for sure. Today, we're going to walk through how C.S. Lewis broke this all down in his classic book, Mere Christianity.
You know, Lewis kicks things off with this really sharp observation. The weird thing isn't just that the universe has bad stuff in it. The real puzzle is that we're here, and we look at it all, and we know that it's bad. We have this deep down sense that this isn't how things are supposed to be.
Yeah, and because the problem is so knotty, Lewis says we can't just reach for a simple, easy answer. So before he even gets into the real meat of his argument, he first kind of clears the deck of a couple of ideas he thinks just don't cut it.
He gives them this great name, boys' philosophies. The first is atheism, which basically tries to solve the problem by saying, well, there's no good God, so there's no problem. The second is this watered-down version of faith that he calls Christianity and water.
And he pretty much dismisses both of them right out of the gate. Why? Well, because he says they're just too simple. They're too neat and tidy for the messy, complicated reality we actually experience every day.
Right? That Christianity and water idea, it's simple because it just chops out all the hard parts of Christian doctrine, you know? It leaves out sin, hell, the devil, and the whole idea of redemption. It's comforting maybe, but as Lewis points out, real things are almost never that simple. He uses the example of a table. It looks simple, but it's actually a dizzying storm of atoms. So if we're looking for the truth about the whole universe, we should probably expect it to be a bit more complex than that.
Okay, so with those simple answers off the table, Lewis turns to what he thinks is the most serious and sensible alternative to Christianity out there, and that's a worldview called dualism.
So what is dualism? Well, in a nutshell, it's the idea that there are two equal and totally independent powers behind the scenes. One is good, one is bad, and they're locked in this eternal cosmic struggle. And in this view, neither one created the other. They've both just always been there. Our universe? It's just the battlefield where these two forces are constantly at war.
Now, Lewis actually has a good bit of respect for this idea. I mean, at least it takes the problem of evil seriously, right? But he says there's a fatal flaw, a logical catch that makes the whole thing fall apart when you really poke at it.
And the whole argument against it starts to unfold from this one very simple question. What do we even mean when we call one of these powers good and the other one bad?
Okay, so follow the logic here. The moment you call one power good and the other bad, you're comparing them to some kind of standard, some law that says what good actually is. That standard has to be above both of them. Lewis calls it a third thing, and he argues that this third thing, this ultimate standard of good, is the real God. And if that's true, then the two powers can't be ultimate or equal after all.
Then he hits it with a second argument, that evil isn't really its own thing at all. He describes it as being like a parasite. It can't live on its own. It has to feed on something that's already good.
Think about it this way. Goodness is original. It can just be. But badness is always a corruption of something that started out good. It's spoiled goodness. You have to have a good thing first before it can go bad.
Exactly. He explains that wickedness is always twisting something good. For instance, you can be cruel to get pleasure, but you can't get pleasure just for the sake of being cruel. The pleasure, the good thing being sought, has to exist first as the motive.
Right. People don't do wicked things just for the sake of being wicked. They're chasing things that are, in and of themselves, good things, like pleasure or safety or power. They're just chasing them in the wrong way, or too much, or at the expense of others. So for a bad power to even exist, it has to borrow all these things: existence, intelligence, will, from the good side. It's a parasite, which means it can't be independent or equal.
So if dualism has this massive logical flaw, how does Christianity account for the obvious war between good and evil we see all around us? Well, Lewis describes it not as a war between two rival powers, but as a civil war.
And that difference is absolutely huge. Dualism says it's a war between two separate kingdoms. Christianity says, no, it's a rebellion that's broken out inside of one kingdom. The universe isn't some neutral territory, it's God's good creation that's currently in a state of revolt.
Right. Christianity teaches that this rebellion was started by a being Lewis calls the dark power. But, and this is key, this being wasn't made evil from the start. It was created good, and then, using its own free will, it went wrong.
The historic Christian doctrine that the devil is a fallen angel is just another way of saying this. He was part of God's good creation, and then he fell.
And because of this ongoing rebellion, Lewis uses this really powerful phrase to describe our world. It is enemy-occupied territory.
But, this whole story, a fallen angel, a cosmic rebellion, it sounds pretty fantastic, doesn't it? So why did C.S. Lewis, a former atheist, actually find this story believable? For him, it came down to the very oddness of reality itself.
Lewis just looked around and noticed that the real world is rarely neat and tidy. It's not simple. It's often really strange and not at all what you'd expect if you were just making something up from scratch.
He uses the solar system as an example. You might think the planets would be arranged in some neat logical order of size or distance, but they're not. It's kind of a jumble. And that strangeness, what he calls that queer twist, is exactly what he saw in the Christian story.
And that leads to his final point, which is really a question for all of us. If reality itself isn't simple, why on earth would we expect the truth about reality to be simple? For Lewis, any religion that seemed too easy or predictable would feel like something a human made up. The very fact that Christianity was strange and unexpected was, for him, a sign that it might just be true.
And that's the thought he really leaves us with. If we live in a world that is clearly good and beautiful, but also terribly and tragically broken, then the real explanation for it probably isn't going to be a simple one. It's going to be just as complex as the reality it's trying to describe, a reality that the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, accounts for in full.